Qantas Steelworks was a big part of my family's life, really before I was born. My great-granddad was a miner, and he worked in one of Qantas Iron Company's mines at Medhamsley, providing coal for the ironworks. And after his eldest son John was killed in the First World War, and Willie was killed down the pit, he said he wasn't having any more of his sons working in the mines. So my granddad came to work at the steelworks, and he was a overhead crane driver at Hounsgill. And then he started in 1923 after he left school, and he worked in the plate mill, and he worked through World War II, helping the war effort. And when so many people were at were at war, he was joined by one of his neighbours, who was a 70-year-old lady. I don't know whether anybody knows Sadie Walton. She's from Bath. She worked as a crane driver at 17 beside her granddad. She's quite an amazing lady. I'm friends with her daughter. Granddad helped load steel made in Qantas onto wagons, and the steel went abroad, UK and abroad, and including specialist steel to construct nuclear power stations in UK and Italy.
So was your dad a rep at that point?
No, that was granddad.
His granddad was a rep?
He was a overhead crane driver.
Oh, overhead crane driver, right,
yeah.
Right.
Then my dad, Harry Carr, he followed granddad at the steelworks in 1956 when he was 23. Prior to that, he'd worked as a farmer labourer, and he did his national service. But my mum and dad wanted to get married, and it was better money in the steelworks, so he swapped to being a steel worker, and he went into as a labourer in the melting shop. My dad's brother Malcolm started as an apprentice fitter and turner on Eden School, and I was just talking to Billy, and he knows Malcolm, and he's 73 and he's still working as a fitter at a local engineering company. He's mad, but that's him. Mum's brother Charlie Stevenson started as an apprentice electrician in the blast furnace, and
just a little connection there. I was saying to you earlier, like Charlie Stevenson, who was running the lawnmower company afterwards. He used to be my foreman at work.
Oh,
Charlie
right.
Stiver.
Right.
Where Ray and I were at the blast furnace.
Oh, right.
Stiver, yeah.
Yeah. So the connection already?
Yeah. Connection already. Oh, be related before long.
Yeah. I worked out, had at least 9 relatives plus various friends and neighbours who were employed at the works. And the first thing was when my younger brother Philip and I were born, it was announced in the magazine that their births were announced in the magazine. As well as being a major employer, 9,000 people at one time, then 6,000 in 1972, and I think by the end just over 3,000 or so. Although I think there's quite a lot more were employed, especially with the supply industry and things like that, the ancillary people, yeah. But I don't know, it just had a major impact on the community, from constructing houses for workers. The houses over in like Roger Street and things like that, they were all, just round by the church, they were all built by the steelworks for workers, and people came in from all over the country. There's an elderly friend of ours, her family moved up from Scunthorpe. A lot of people, if you look back, we're looking at that directory, people like the Parisis came from Italy, didn't they, the Italians, and there was Poles and all sorts of people came to work because of the steelworks. And the steelworks actually funded like this park here, churches. Even I was noticing the advertiser this week, the Concert Scout Hut's just been knocked down because it's been replaced by a new building, but it was paid for by the steelworks. But there's a lot of social life. I think we were all involved in the same, I remember, there was sort of dinner dances and sporting clubs, and I can remember going for a day out of Red Car in Saltburn, funded by the mountain shop when I was a little girl, and even got pocket money for the day and things like that. I'm not going forever. Early memories for me include hearing the venture buses running past our house for the first shift at 6 till 2, with buses coming down the road bringing nurses for the hospital. The hospital had a specialist burns unit because of the steelworks, but once the steelworks closed, the hospital was kind of doomed because there was no need in the move the burns unit to Durham. I soon got used to the shift pattern, 6 till 2, 2 till 10 and night shift. We had to learn to play quietly when Dad was in bed after night shift. Dad first travelled to work by motorbike, then by car. And I can remember waiting for him coming home on Christmas Day, looking outside and it was snowing, and waiting for him walking home in the snow. After Dad got his qualifications in iron steel making, he moved to the new Oxford steel plant. Consett was one of the first companies in Great Britain to realise the potential of using commercial oxygen for steel making. In 1963, Dad was part of a team who went to Holland, Austria and Sweden to complete a field trip to study the suitability of various steel making processes. They looked at various plants and decided the LD process used by the Donawitz plants in Austria and the Caldor plant in Donnerwet in Sweden were the best processes, and they brought them to Consett when they started to become a producer of high quality specialist steels, and they spent 10 million on the new LD steel plant. Dad became assistant shift manager and was employed there to the end, and he was there when they made the last load of steel and helped run the plant down. I can remember being scared when I heard the siren. It was the same as an air raid warning when there was an accident or a problem. And because we lived by Shotty Bridge Hospital, we got used to the ambulances going up and down. One day in 1964, Mum was outside the house walking with my brother was in the pram. He was 6 months and I was 4, when an ambulance went past. She had a good instinct it was Dad, and it was. He'd had an accident, he broke his leg in 3 places at the works. He returned to work, and I remember he used to tell me quite a lot about the works. He used to, because he worked right up close, he had to wear a safety suit and overalls with a special keep-proof jacket, and he wore a safety hat with a visor because he worked so close to the vessels. He had scars on his neck where he'd been caught by a spark or two. He sometimes spent days in a row at work if they were relining a vessel or there'd been a breakdown, and they would send the works van out to get fish and chips to keep them going. I can remember being excited at one time because Mum drove us over in our car down the canyon to meet Dad at one of the car parks. We were delivering clean clothes and food and probably baccy because he smoked a pipe during his break time. We used to tease him about his train set because in 1969 molten steel supplies were brought from Teesside using large capacity torpedo ladles. It was the first time British Rail had transported liquid iron in the UK, and Dad was in charge of the shift of meeting for meeting the train and processing the iron to steel. And at one time in about 1968, Consett produced 60,000 tonnes of steel a week through its own production and processing steel from Teesside. Consett could process the steel cheaper than Teesside, but Consett was sacrificed to save Teesside, where now only the Red Carp plant remains. I can also remember the red dust. In the 1970s, there was an international folk dance festival organised in Consett. Visitors from Dernside, Twin Town, Verdal and other people from around Europe came to perform at the Empire Theatre. On the Saturday, clouds of red dust filled the Consett sky. Dad's Auntie Hilda Burnhope complained about the dust giving people a bad impression of Consett, and couldn't they stop the dust? Mum silenced her when she said, well, unfortunately it was her favourite nephew's fault. When you went up and down the A68 you could see Consett for miles ahead. I also remember the red glow at night when they tipped the slag waste production from steel on the slag heaps between Black Hill, Bridge Hill and the Grove, and now all that's grassed over. Mum's brother Billy, also known as Charlie Stevens, not Charlie Stiver, lived next door to my family. Billy worked as an electrician at the blast furnace department. He was often on call and they would send a company van next door to collect them. Sometimes, as there were 2 Charlie Stevensons in Queen's Road, they'd get them mixed up. And often Billy and his wife didn't hear their van, so we had to get up and wake them up ourselves. It was devastating when it was announced Consett was closing. The year before, there'd been a march through Consett to the House of Parliament and to protest about the closure, but to no avail. Closure had been predicted on and off over the years, and one of Dad's cousins, Glenn, who had been an electrician, had already left to take an alternative employment, but Dad loved his job and wanted to stay. He didn't like giving out redundancy notice by hand to his men who lived in Consett and the surrounding area like Chocolate and Stanley. Ironically, I started work with your sister at the Unemployment Benefit Office in October 1980, in time for the hundreds of new claims to benefit. When the notices ran out and they had to claim from the 9th of December 1980. Over 3,000 people, as I said, were made redundant. Some of my former colleagues, because I don't work there anymore, were once employed at the BSC concert. People like Martin, Westgarth, Bernie Malone and Val. There were so many of us we had to be bused to offices in Newcastle and Gateshead to be trained. At first they used the premises at the Fell Coke Works for people to sign on, but eventually they opened a second office. The old Victoria Road office dealt with claims from the surname A to L, and the new office in the Derwent Centre M to Z. But now the job set is back in 1 on Benhamsley Road. Many people found new jobs. 2 of our relatives emigrated to Australia. Dad and Billy started their own business, as some of you already know, and I've got a photograph here. I've got quite a few photographs in that one. This photograph here was taken by the Daily Express, and that's my dad, Harry Carr. That's Bob Bewley, that started the cacti business, and that's Charlie Stiverson, and they joined together to start Causeway Lawnmower Services. But unfortunately, they're both dead now. Some people never worked again, but I think overall Consett has recovered quite well in comparison to some areas that were former steel towns like Corby and in Wales and things like that.